What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic Fantasy Football YouTube channel. Today, we are going to be talking a few running back bust candidates near the top of drafts, and to do so with me is Nick Lepri on Twitter at Notorious Fantasy. Nick, July is here. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing excellent today. And July, like you said, July is here. And this is where people start to really feel the itch for fantasy football. And then next month is where it's basically just a bunch of chickens running with their heads cut off. Very excited to talk about fantasy football. So I love fantasy football. And I'm very excited to talk about the running backs today because I think that people have very strong opinions on all of these players that we're going to be discussing today. And it's very interesting to see how our opinions compare to what we see in the comment section.
For sure. I'm definitely getting that fantasy football itch now that July is here. And just for reference, we will be talking players near the top of drafts. So we're not necessarily saying that we think these players are going to fail. We are just going to lay out cases for why they might underperform expectation. Again, not saying they won't be usable in fantasy football week over week. But before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live across the channel. You and I are doing a ton of work here as well as Savoca, Laffy, and some others. And for the purposes of this video, we will be using Underdog's ADP. They're the primary sponsor of the show and the best place to play fantasy football in the summer. But if they're a little different in your league, just know we are using Underdog for ADP. All right, what do you say we get into this?
All right, let's do it.
Okay, we're going to start with one of your players, and we'll kind of zigzag back and forth here. Javonte Williams is a player you wanted to talk about as a potential bust candidate near the top. Now, he is coming off the board with some pretty rich draft capital right now. ADP of 24.6 on Underdog, RB12. That's climbed a little bit. I think there's some circumstances kind of out of his control that have realized that. I mean, Alvin Kamara, the potential suspension looming, has sort of artificially pushed Javonte Williams upwards. But right now, you got to spend a lot to get him. Lay out the case for me why he might be a bust candidate.
Yeah, so the reason why I dislike Javonte Williams this season is not necessarily because I think that Javonte Williams is really a bad player at all, because I think if Williams was given the workhorse role in this offense, if he was given 70% of the snap share, which I don't think he's going to be getting this year, then Javonte Williams could dominate fantasy. He could be even a top 5 back, especially with how good this Denver Broncos team kind of on paper looks like they should be with Russell Wilson now taking over. But at the end of the day, I do not believe that is going to be the case. I do believe that Melvin Gordon is going to have an impact on this team. How strong of an impact is it going to be? Is it going to be a 50-50 snap share split? In my opinion, probably not. But I think even if it is 60-40 in the favor of Javonte Williams, that hurts Javonte Williams enough to where I just don't feel comfortable drafting him that early on in the draft. I understand that Javonte Williams is one injury away from fantasy superstardom, but the same exact thing could be said about the other running back on the team, Melvin Gordon, who you can get at a very strong discount if Javonte Williams was to get hurt. I'm not projecting injuries. There's no reason to believe that Javonte Williams is going to get hurt. But if he did, then Melvin Gordon would instantly become a running back one in fantasy football. Again, I think Javonte Williams is a very good player, but I don't think they bring back Melvin Gordon and then just not use him. I just don't think that really would make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest case for Javonte Williams is that you have a new coaching staff, so you're not really sure what that split is going to look like. And we have seen this in the past where running backs in their second year kind of take over offenses. It happened with Jonathan Taylor, not comparing Javonte to Jonathan Taylor, but that is just a case that it does happen. Now, this is going to be a better offense overall. So it's kind of a rising tide lifts all boats situation with Russell Wilson coming in. I think Javonte Williams scores more than 4 rushing touchdowns. Now he kind of buoyed that with 3 receiving touchdowns as well, and he is an excellent pass catcher. But ultimately, you do bring back Melvin Gordon for a reason. At the very least, it's a depth play. So to me, I am a little lower than ADP as well. We find ourselves in agreement on Javonte Williams. Anything else to add?
Yeah, and this isn't a full fade on Javonte Williams. All I'm saying is that I believe that I'm not overly looking to draft him, right? And based on his ADP, I probably will not end up drafting him in a majority of my drafts.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I am as well. Still like him as a player, just a little rich. We hate ADPs, not players. Actually, love Javonte Williams as a player. But I'll give you my first. It is Ezekiel Elliott, and he's coming off the board a little bit later. His ADP currently is 40.6 on Underdog. That is running back 17. So he's coming off the board just behind Nick Chubb, James Conner, Alvin Kamara, and Travis Etienne. But as you can see, there's a considerable ADP jump once you get past those backs. So ADP of 40 0.6. Now, with Ezekiel Elliott, there's actually a lot to dislike. And the first comes from his efficiency. It's been declining throughout his career and steadily of late. Last year, he did suffer a PCL injury very early on in the season, but you can look at the downward trend. It began before that injury. And conversely, you have an explosive running back in Tony Pollard who's ascending in his career. Yes, they paid Ezekiel Elliott the big bucks, but at some point, this team actually has to win games. And when he is directly contributing to them potentially losing games and they have a better alternative within the backfield, it's just hard for me to see Ezekiel Elliott getting the same workload he's gotten over the past few seasons. And that's really what has contributed to his fantasy relevance is pure workload. If that goes away, I think we see negative regression from Ezekiel Elliott as soon as this year. Are you in agreement with me here?
Yeah, I kind of like Ezekiel Elliott a little bit more than you do, but I'm not super bullish on him. I don't have him ranked as like a top 12 running back or anything like that. I'm just going to personally believe that the injury that he suffered last season is what really hurt him, because it was pretty clear if you look at his game stats from a per game basis that after he suffered those injuries, he really started to fall off. And towards the end of the season, things looked very bad for him. I really believe that if the Dallas Cowboys offense is able to stay a little bit more consistent, then we could see Ezekiel Elliott ascend back to maybe being a top 12 running back in fantasy football. I'm not saying he's a must draft candidate. I think there are worries with Tony Pollard because of how good he is, but I still believe Zeke is the number one back on the team. But I'm not going to disagree with what you said, because there are a lot of reasons why you might want to be fading Ezekiel Elliott. I just think at his draft price right now, I think the kind of risks are baked into that.
Yeah, looking at the players going around him, just for reference, directly after him, you have Breece Hall, Cam Akers, David Montgomery, J.K. Dobbins. A few names in there I definitely prefer ahead of him, Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins. There's a case to be made for Breece Hall, but again, he's going to have to knock down that workload, and I'm not sure he does that. So there's certainly two backs I would definitely rather have over Ezekiel Elliott at his current ADP. And yes, you are right. The PCL injury certainly affected him, but this has been a downward trend for multiple seasons. So yes, the PCL probably accelerated it, but we're still dealing with a very inefficient runner regardless. But before we move on, I want to talk to you about our presenting sponsor, Underdog. We've been talking about them all throughout the video. The single best place to play fantasy football in the summer months. Best Ball Mania 3 has been going on for a little while now, but if you don't know, that is a $10 million prize pool tournament. And all you have to do is draft your team. That's it. There's no waivers, no in-season management, none of that. Underdog is just going to give you your highest score every single week, and then the overall highest score at the end of the year wins. Last year's Best Ball Mania Championship team was drafted in June, so there is no time to wait. And better yet, they're going to double your first deposit up to $100 when you use the promo code AWESEMO. It's good for 4 entries into Best Ball Mania 3. Head to UnderdogFantasy.com, head to the App Store, or even just click the link in the video description below. Use the promo code AWESEMO and take advantage of that extra $100. All right, let's get to your second candidate here. And it's actually a player that was just briefly mentioned. It is Breece Hall. Now, Breece Hall, the rookie of the New York Jets, coming off the board with an ADP of 45.1. That is running back 18. It's actually 5 picks behind Ezekiel Elliott. So there's a lot of hype on this guy. He was a really interesting prospect coming out of Iowa State. But overall, it's a bad offense and an offense with a lot of questions. So talk to me about Breece Hall.
Yeah, my biggest concern with Breece Hall, and probably something that is swaying me away from being as concerned, is that it seems like every single year a rookie running back really does flourish in fantasy football, right? And finishes inside the top 10, the top 12. But this year that may not be the case, as I really do believe that Breece Hall is going to be in a situation that is not ideal. I do not believe that in year number one, Breece Hall is going to be jolted into this workhorse running back role. And I believe that is what a lot of people think is going to end up happening. Now, Breece Hall wasn't necessarily this crazy receiving running back in college. Last season, he had 44 targets, 36 receptions in college. And I think that Michael Carter is going to potentially make a huge dent into what could be a great receiving season for Breece Hall. I think that Michael Carter, based upon what we saw last season, earned enough of a role. He scooped enough of a role out of this offense that I'm quite concerned about Breece Hall in terms of his year number one in Dynasty. A year from now, maybe Breece Hall is the clear number one running back. Maybe all of these questions we have about the Jets offense. Is Zach Wilson really the guy? Is this offensive line going to be great? Is this team really going to ascend to the next level offensively, especially with a defensive-minded coach? There's a lot of questions I have for the Jets, and there's a lot of questions that I have for Breece Hall. but maybe next year we're a lot more confident. It's another year of Zach Wilson, another year of Breece Hall kind of feeling his way into this offense. But right now in 2022, in his rookie year, I am just not completely sold on Breece Hall because I really think that Michael Carter is better than people are giving him the credit for, and that is going to hurt Breece Hall in year one. Think about it like Jonathan Taylor in year one versus year number two, where Naheem Hines was cutting into that role for Jonathan Taylor. I think that's what we see year number one for Breece Hall.
For me, it's basically the same thing as Ezekiel Elliott. You can get Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins later. Both players, I don't have as many question marks. So with Breece Hall, I like the player overall. He has great size, adjusted speed. No, he didn't really put that on the field at Iowa State, but we know it's at least there. When you look at him at the college level, he was forcing missed tackles at an above average rate, but he just wasn't creating yards after them. He had 2.83 yards after contact per attempt. That's below the collegiate average for running back. So even though we had a great size adjusted speed specimen, he still wasn't able to put that on the field. Kind of reminds me of Najee Harris coming out. I'm not sure he's the same talent as like a Jonathan Taylor or Javonte Williams that could potentially knock another talented back like Michael Carter off the field early in his career. Might take some time with him. So ultimately, we are in agreement. Anything else to add?
No, I don't think so.
All right, let's go to my final player. It is David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears, actually coming off the board right after Breece Hall and then Cam Akers, ADP of 53.3. He is RB20, and he is being drafted exclusively on the workload he received with the Matt Nagy regime, the worst coaching staff arguably in football last year. Now there's a new coaching staff. We don't know if they believe in him to the same degree. There's a talented backup in Khalil Herbert who showed explosiveness, something that David Montgomery has never displayed, even going back to college. And we have the worst offensive line in football, an offensive line that is going to be starting a fifth-round rookie and just lost Dakota Dozier, projected starter at guard, to a season-ending injury. I don't know who they're going to be putting out there, man, but there's a chance they might be calling me and you off the street this year. So David Montgomery, we're not expecting efficiency, something he's never displayed in his career anyway, and he might be sharing a little more of the backfield than we expect with Khalil Herbert. Really hard to draft this guy, in my opinion, ahead of J.K. Dobbins and some of the other players going behind him. What do you think of Montgomery?
Yeah, David Montgomery is one of the more confusing players for me because there are some games where David Montgomery did play really good last season, but then there's also the outlier games where he's not even close to sniffing the top 10, and it's very hard to draft a player that is as inconsistent, in my opinion, as David Montgomery. We see multiple game stretches where he finishes outside of the top 24 at the running back position. With how many bye weeks there are in the NFL, it's pretty easy to be a top 24 running back, especially later on in the season. And in those later on in the season games, like week 9, he's running back 32, week 11, running back 25, week 12, running back 24. Those are the weeks where teams are on bye. It should be easy for him to be a top 24 running back, and he doesn't even do it. I think David Montgomery might be a little bit more talented than you're giving him the credit for. But again, this is the Bears offense with a bad offensive line, with who the fuck knows how good Justin Fields is going to end up being, and who knows how this new head coach is going to be doing things. And maybe we see a little bit more Khalil Herbert, because like you mentioned, Khalil Herbert, when David Montgomery went down, looked like a legitimate force at the running back position. I'm not saying he's like the next whatever running back, the next Christian McCaffrey or something, but David Montgomery's backup, Khalil Herbert, is actually pretty solid. So I'm pretty worried about David Montgomery, and my worries have only gotten worse as we've gotten closer to the season. I have a decent amount of David Montgomery right now in best ball, but it's just because it seems like no one wants to draft him, and he's falling even further than his ADP in a lot of drafts.
For sure. And again, what this all comes down to is, where can I get him in relation to other players? If he starts going behind J.K. Dobbins, maybe even Elijah Mitchell, I'll start taking David Montgomery. But there's enough concerns right now where I'm going to take the more secure players after him. And that's the case really with every running back we discussed today. Anything else to add overall?
Yeah, and in best ball, when I'm taking him, I'm fine taking maybe those shitty weeks where he scores like 7 points, because guess what? I don't have to play him. But in my fantasy football redraft league, you're going to have to actually figure that out, and it's going to be very tough for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And for sure, before you head out of here, let us know in the comment section who you think the primary bust candidates are. Again, we're looking at top 20 running backs, top 24. Everyone we discussed today is in the top 24. So, I mean, you can make cases for all these players outside the top 24, like Antonio Gibson, Josh Jacobs. They for sure have concerns. We were going a little higher up the board. So let us know what you think about the players we discussed, who you think might be a bust candidate, and hit the thumbs up button on the way out. You can follow Nick on Twitter at Notorious Fantasy. You see it on the screen in front of you. I am on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you again next time.